We're moving in a new direction, Cameron said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. I sat across from him in the same boardroom where I'd presented infrastructure plans, disaster recovery strategies, and budget proposals for nearly 2 decades. Now, I was here to be let go. My name is Marcus Keene. I'm 54 years old, and for the last 20 years, I've been the senior infrastructure engineer at Halberton Communities, a property management firm based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or rather was. Cameron Yates, the new chief technology officer, had only been with the company for about 8 months. Young, slick, MBA from Rotman, always speaking in buzzwords like synergy and digital acceleration. He'd barely learned how our systems ran before he started making changes. I'm sure this comes as a shock, he continued, folding his hands on the polished table like a man who thought he was being compassionate. But the reality is, we can hire 3 junior engineers for the cost of your salary. He smiled, as if he'd just told me he was upgrading my office. I didn't return it. Sitting beside him was Rebecca from HR. She slid a folder toward me. Your severance package, she said. It includes 4 months' salary, unused vacation, and health coverage for the next 6 months. I took the folder. I didn't say anything right away. Cameron shifted in his seat. Marcus, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's just cost efficiency. I finally spoke. Is that all? He blinked. Sorry? Is that all you have to say? I repeated. He looked like he expected me to explode, maybe even hoped I would. Something to justify his decision, to validate his plan. But I wasn't angry. Not visibly, at least. I was just done. There's a difference. I'd like to ask for your help with the transition, he said, after a pause. Maybe a short consulting period to get the new team up to speed on the system you've built. I'll think about it, I said, knowing I wouldn't. I stood, shook hands with both of them, and walked out of the boardroom. I cleared out my desk in less than an hour. 20 years of my life, reduced to a single cardboard box. Most of the office avoided eye contact. A few of the older techs gave me quiet nods. In the underground parking lot, I sat in my truck, just staring at the folder in my lap. My phone buzzed. A message from Amira, one of the data engineers I'd mentored. Is it true? You're gone? I didn't answer. Back home, I sat on the back porch, overlooking the water. Halifax Harbor was calm that evening. The sunset turned, the sky a soft orange, reflected perfectly in the waves. My wife Lisa brought me a drink and sat down beside me. She didn't ask what happened. What are you going to do now? She said after a while. I looked out over the water. Something'll come up, I said. What Cameron didn't know, what no one in that room had bothered to learn, was that I hadn't just managed their systems. I'd designed them, coded entire segments myself, built in layers of redundancy and security that no one else understood, because they never funded the documentation team I kept requesting. They thought they were cutting a cost. What they'd really done was cut their foundation. The next morning, I woke up early. Habit, I guess. 20 years of 6:30 alarms will do that to you, even when you don't have anywhere to be. Lisa was still asleep. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the lake through the window. The house was quiet, peaceful. But my head wasn't. Most people saw me as the guy who fixed the Wi-Fi or rebooted a server when something glitched. What they didn't see, what they never saw, was the architecture behind it all, the invisible framework holding everything together. When I joined Halberton Communities, it was barely more than a family-run operation, managing a few mid-rise apartment blocks in Halifax and Dartmouth. No real IT infrastructure, just two desktop computers, an aging fax machine, and a dusty DSL modem in the back room of a leased office. I was 34, coming off a short-term contract with a small firm in Charlottetown. Halberton's founder, David Halberton, interviewed me himself. "We're growing fast," he told me. "We need someone who can think ahead." And that's what I did. I built the backbone of the company's digital operations, one piece at a time: tenant onboarding, maintenance scheduling, payment processing, background checks, server integrations, security protocols, cloud backups, redundancy layers, data encryption, remote access portals for building managers. Not flashy, not sleek, but reliable, secure, scalable. I tried, more than once, to push for a documentation team. "We're too small right now," they'd say. "Let's revisit that next quarter." That quarter never came. I ended up documenting most of it myself in fragmented notes and internal wikis, but no one ever read them. No one really wanted to understand the system until something went wrong. That's the thing about infrastructure. If it works, people forget it exists. A few years later, Halberton acquired properties in New Brunswick, then Newfoundland, then Ontario. We went from 6 buildings to over 70 in 5 provinces. I restructured everything on the fly. I worked weekends, holidays, overnight migrations. No fanfare, no bonuses, just the work. When David retired 5 years ago, his son, Colin, took over as CEO. He was a different kind of leader, more focused on growth targets and branding than operational stability. The moment he brought in outside investors, I knew something had shifted. Suddenly, we had consultants walking through the office, asking about cloud optimization and cost efficiencies. They never looked at the guts of the system, only the numbers. It wasn't long before the new CTO, Cameron Yates, arrived with a mandate to modernize. He didn't ask how things worked. He asked how much they cost. And now, here I was, on my porch, drinking coffee in silence, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water like they had nowhere better to be. Lisa joined me a few minutes later. "You, no," she said, sipping her tea. "You always said the one thing that kept the whole company running was the system you built. Not the meetings, not the managers, the system." "I know." She glanced at me. "Do they?" I thought about that. "No," I said. "But they will." The first message came 3 days after I left. It was from Cameron. "Hey, Marcus. Hope you're doing well. Quick question. Our team is having a bit of trouble accessing the maintenance request dashboard. Any chance you'd be open to a short consultation?" I didn't respond. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then swiped it away and went back to stacking firewood along the side of the house. Lisa watched from the kitchen, eyebrows raised. "Trouble already?" she asked through the open window. "Something like that," I said. 2 more messages followed the next day. One from Cameron, one from Rebecca in HR, both polite, both offering generous hourly compensation. I still said nothing. By the end of the week, the tone shifted. Marcus, it's urgent now. The tenant portal is down. We're getting hundreds of complaints. Our junior devs say the database mapping is confusing. Please call me. That one actually made me chuckle. Of course, it was confusing. They never bothered to learn how the system was structured, never asked why it had so many layers, never questioned the logic behind my approach. The system wasn't just a pile of code, it was a living network, built piece by piece to handle real world problems, redundancy during outages, compartmentalization during upgrades, cross validation between regional servers. Skip one step, and the whole process would fail. And now it had. The next morning, I got a text from Amira. System's been down all night. Tenant payments aren't processing. Cameron's in full panic mode. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. I wasn't ready to say anything. That evening, Lisa and I sat on the deck, wrapped in blankets as the autumn wind rolled in from the harbor. She handed me a glass of wine. They'll keep calling, she said. I know. Are you going to help? I took a sip before answering. No, it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about principle. They didn't value experience. They valued savings. But now they were learning the cost of forgetting who holds the blueprint. The next morning, Rebecca from HR called again. This time, I let it go to voicemail. She sounded strained. Marcus, we'd really like to discuss a short-term consulting engagement. The board has approved a generous rate, $450 per hour, 4-hour minimum. Please let us know. I stared at the phone. $450 an hour, 18 years of loyalty, replaced by 3 interns, and a number on a spreadsheet. I didn't care about the money, but the calls kept coming from Cameron, from Rebecca, from Colin Halberton himself, all variations of the same plea. Come back, just for a bit. Just help us get things back on track. I didn't respond until one evening, as I was grilling dinner on the back deck, my phone rang again. This time, I let it go to voicemail, as usual, but something in Cameron's voice made me play it back. Marcus, I know you're upset. I know we mishandled things, but Brunel Group is threatening to pull their contract. That's over 30% of our revenue. The system's failing. Please, help us. Lisa stepped outside as I replayed the message. Brunel, she asked. I nodded. If they walk, Halberton's done. She looked at me carefully. What are you thinking? I poked at the grill. I'm thinking they're finally starting to understand. The email came late on a Tuesday night. Was up in the den, cleaning out old project folders on my home server when I saw the notification pop up. Subject, Opportunity at North Edge Residential, from Daniel Morneau. Hadn't seen that name in years. Daniel and I had worked together briefly during a regional housing project back in 2009. He was a rising systems strategist back then. Sharp, ambitious, the kind of guy who took notes while everyone else talked. Opened the message. Marcus, I heard what happened at Halberton. Word travels fast. I won't pretend to understand what went down, but I know what kind of work you do. I've followed your infrastructure at Halberton for years. It's admired across the industry, even if no one says it out loud. I'm reaching out because we're about to scale fast, and we need a mind like yours to build something real. At the bottom, a simple question: can we talk? The next afternoon, we met at a small cafe in downtown Halifax, the kind of place with exposed brick, warm light, and jazz playing just loud enough to keep conversations private. Daniel looked older than I remembered, but so did I. He shook my hand like he meant it. "I'm sorry about what happened," he said after we sat down. I shrugged. "I'm not." That caught him off guard. He smiled. "I like that." We talked for nearly 2 hours. North Edge Residential had recently acquired several mid-sized portfolios in Quebec and Ontario. Their systems were fragmented, some old, some off the shelf, none of them talking to each other. They needed a complete rebuild, from scratch. "We don't want fancy," Daniel said. "We want solid, resilient, built to last." What you built at Halberton. People noticed. They just didn't have the guts to say it until now. I leaned back. "And you're offering?" "A blank slate," he said. "You'd be chief systems architect, full autonomy, competitive salary, equity options, full benefits, and, if you're interested, authority to build a proper engineering team. Your way." It was a better deal than anything I'd seen in years, and for the first time in weeks, I felt steady, not vindicated, not victorious, just clear. "I have one condition," I said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "We document everything, from day one. No shortcuts. No, we'll get to it next quarter. Full specs, redundancy maps, disaster protocols. We build it right." He nodded. "Agreed. We've learned the hard way what happens when you don't." That night, I sat with Lisa on the porch, watching the moonlight ripple across the harbor. "You took it?" she asked. "I did." She smiled. "Good. You deserve to build something that respects you back." I thought about Halberton, about Cameron, about the stack of voicemails I still hadn't deleted. They had made their decision, and now I had made mine. Not to fight, not to fix, but to start again. A week into my new role at North Edge, I was settling in. My office was smaller. The desk was secondhand. The chair squeaked if I leaned too far back. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that I had a blank whiteboard and a team that listened. No corporate jargon, no layers of middle management, just the work. That's when I got the message from Amira. "Got a minute to talk? I found something you should see." We met for lunch at a deli 2 blocks from North Edge's headquarters. She looked tired, eyes a little sunken, like someone who hadn't had a full night's sleep since I left. "I quit," she said, before we even ordered. I blinked. "You too?" She nodded. 3 others from the IT team followed. Cameron's losing grip. Everyone's afraid to touch the system. And now that Brunel is threatening to walk, she trailed off. I didn't say anything. Instead, I waited. She opened her laptop. I was trying to help the consultants debug the payment system. Stupid of me, I know, but I stumbled on this in the archives. She slid the laptop across the table. It was an email chain between Cameron Yates and Colin Halberton, dated 2 months before I was let go. Subject line: Legacy Staff, Cost Reduction Plan. My name was right there. Keen's system is over-engineered. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity. If we remove him, we can migrate to a leaner, outsourced model. I estimate 1.2 million in annual savings within 6 months. There were more talks with the private equity firm, planning timelines, internal memos about modernizing perception before the upcoming sale. I scrolled silently. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't misjudgment. It was premeditated. They didn't just fire me to cut costs. They erased me to make the company look better. For a sale, I closed the laptop and leaned back. You okay? Amira asked. I thought about it. I will be, I said. She paused, then smiled faintly. Actually, I was wondering, is North Edge hiring? Later that day, I brought it up to Daniel. We might want to bring in Amira, database specialist. She knows the old Halberton structure inside and out. Daniel didn't hesitate. If she's your pick, I trust you. That evening, I got another call from Cameron. His voice had lost all its bravado. Marcus, I know you've moved on, but Brunel just officially terminated their contract. We're scrambling. Colin's on damage control with the board. Please, just an hour of your time. I didn't answer right away. He kept talking. Name your rate. Anything. Just help us get back on our feet. I let the silence stretch before I replied. It's not about the rate, Cameron. Then what is it about? Respect, I said. For the time, for the work, for the people you think are disposable. A pause. You knew this would happen, didn't you? You knew exactly where the system would break. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. No, Cameron, I said. I just knew what it took to keep it working, and I tried to share that. Many times. I hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger or bitterness. I felt clarity. Some lessons only get learned through failure. 2 weeks after Brunel dropped Halberton, North Edge got the call. Daniel poked his head into my office with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. You're going to want to take this one, he said, holding up his phone. It was Jeffrey Brunel, CEO of the Brunel Group. Their portfolio covered nearly 12,000 residential units across Ontario and Atlantic Canada. Daniel put him on speaker. We've heard good things about what you're building, Marcus, Jeffrey said. Reliable things. We'd like to talk about a full system migration, starting as soon as possible. I glanced at Daniel. We're not quite at that scale yet, I said honestly. Not today. How soon could you be? Jeffrey asked. I leaned forward, already calculating. We'd need at least 3 more senior engineers, dedicated server clusters, 8 weeks minimum for development, 10 to 12 for full onboarding. Silence on the line. Then, North Edge will be compensated accordingly. We'll fund the expansion. When the call ended, Daniel turned to me. You are not building a system anymore, he said. You're building a company, and that's exactly what we did. Over the next few weeks, we expanded fast. 5 new engineers. Amira led a database team that built a custom translation tool to convert Halberton's broken legacy data into our cleaner, modular structure. I designed the new architecture with one guiding principle. No single point of failure. Everything was documented. Every connection mapped. Every onboarding process recorded and trained. Not just passed along in whispers. At week 9, Daniel called another meeting. Marcus, he said, there's something else. He turned his laptop toward me. An email from Colin Halberton. I'd like to personally apologize for how your departure was handled. The board was misled. Cameron has been removed. If you're ever open to returning, we'd welcome the chance to make things right. I closed the laptop. I appreciate the sentiment, I said, but I'm not going back. Daniel didn't push. He just smiled. They'll be cheaper to buy soon anyway. That caught my attention. He leaned in. The investors behind Halberton are panicking. With Brunel gone, the company's valuation has dropped by over half. We're considering making an acquisition offer. I stared at him. You're serious? If we take them, we'd need someone who knows both systems. Someone who can guide the integration. Someone like you. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the server racks I once built by hand, the long weekends, the migrations at midnight. I thought about the box they'd handed me when they let me go. And now? Now I was being asked to return not as an employee, but as the architect of their future. If we do this, I said slowly, we do it my way. Full transition plan, full staff training, no shortcuts. Agreed. The acquisition went through a month later. North Edge bought Halberton Communities for less than a third of its valuation before I was fired. When I walked through their old headquarters as part of the transition team, some of the employees looked away. Others nodded quietly. A few smiled, relieved to see someone who actually knew how things worked. Cameron was gone. So was most of the executive team. Colin stayed on as a consultant. He met my eyes once in the boardroom and nodded, but didn't say anything. That was fine. We weren't here for apologies. We were here to rebuild. 6 months after the acquisition, the Halberton logo came down. In its place, North Edge Integrated Residential Systems. The new sign wasn't flashy, just clean, simple, honest. We had done it. Brunel's portfolio had been fully migrated. Tenants no longer flooded the help desk with complaints. Building managers could finally access real-time updates, and for the first time in years, engineers weren't scared to touch the codebase because they actually understood it. Every component was documented. Every deployment had a fallback. Every person on the team knew how the system worked, and, more importantly, why it worked that way. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel called me into his office. The leaves outside along the Halifax waterfront had turned a fiery red, just like they had the week I was let go. But this time, things felt different. I just got off the call with the board, he said. They've approved your proposal. I sat down. The training division? I asked. Daniel smiled. It's a go. Full autonomy. Build the curriculum. Hire your instructors. Teach the next generation how to build things that last. I didn't need a title. Didn't need a bigger office. What I needed was this. A way to make sure no one like me ever got pushed aside again just because they built things too well. A week later, I cleared out the integration office. This time, there was no cardboard box, just a slow walk down the hallway, past former Halberton employees, many of whom had chosen to stay on under North Edge. Some smiled, some looked away, a few nodded, quietly acknowledging everything unspoken between us. I stopped by the courtyard to take one last look at the old building. It had changed, But the bones were still there. So was Colin Halberton. He walked up beside me, hands in his coat pockets. My father asked about you, he said, eyes on the skyline. David. Yeah, he's retired in PEI now. Still follows industry news. I nodded. He was glad to hear you were back. Well, back-ish. I didn't say anything. Colin turned to me. You know, he used to say, if we ever lose Marcus, that's the beginning of the end. I thought he was exaggerating. Turns out he wasn't. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just let it hang in the air. After a moment, he continued. I've learned something through all this, he said, quietly. Value isn't always visible, especially when it's working so well. No one notices. He offered his hand. I shook it, and then I left. That winter, the training division launched. We didn't just teach code, we taught architecture, resilience, responsibility, the things that make systems survive, and people too. Some of our first hires were former Halberton juniors, bright, eager, and, for the first time, properly mentored. No one skipped documentation. No one rolled their eyes at legacy knowledge. The culture had shifted because the pain had been real, because the lesson had been hard won. And as for me, never needed revenge. I never needed them to fail. I just needed to show what was possible when you're finally allowed to build it right. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have helped rebuild the system or walked away for good? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy real stories of justice, resilience, and quiet revenge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. New episodes drop every week, right here on Reddit Revenge Stories. Thanks for listening.